What's good everybody, this is CP and welcome back to another very special fantasy basketball video. Today I'm going to give everyone another exclusive inside look into one of my actual fantasy basketball leagues. I will deep dive into one of my more competitive long-term keeper leagues. I will bring you along and give you a behind the scenes look as I try to rebuild a modern day dynasty that can compete for multiple championships for the next 5 to 7 years. Hopefully you can learn from some of my insights, mistakes, and apply them to help you win your own fantasy leagues. Not only for this season but for those in long-term keeper and dynasty leagues for many years down the road as well. But most importantly, for 15 years of good luck in fantasy basketball, make sure you like this video within the next 5 seconds. I wouldn't risk it. So let's not waste any more time and 走起吧.
Yeah!
To quickly give everyone some background, I am in a competitive 12-team head-to-head 9-category keeper league, where every team is allowed to keep 4 players at the end of every season. The league started way back in 2012 and we're currently heading into our 9th season, so it's fair to say that pretty much every manager has been heavily invested in this league for much of this decade. I'm not gonna lie, but early on in this league I had a pretty good run where I made the finals twice, captured 1 championship, and finished in the top 4 for 4 consecutive seasons. At one point I even had a Golden State Warriors 73-9 type of season, where I only lost 2 weeks the entire year. Naturally, I made it to the finals that year, but somehow ended up losing by 0.05 field goal percentage. I'm still pissed about it. And during that time, my core players were Steph Curry, Dame Lillard, Serge Ibaka, and Derek Favors. Around that time, the NBA was still adapting to the emergence of the three-point shot, and Steph Curry was one of those rare fantasy three-point shooters that could average more than 3 triples per game. So owning Curry was like a huge cheat code in many ways, as he was able to help me win the three-point category week after week. At the same time, Serge Ibaka was one of the rare fantasy players in basketball that averaged more than 2.5 blocks per game. So having both Steph and Serge Ibaka healthy gave me the ability to depend on only 2 players to carry my teams weeks on end. But as the years went on, my core started to slowly crumble. More dominant 3-point shooters started to emerge around the league, and Ibaka's block rate started to slowly decline. So finally, in 2017, I decided to give my team a major facelift. Dame Lillard wanted to be the franchise guy and didn't want to play second fiddle to Steph Curry. He had a few heated discussions with my staff and we just couldn't see eye to eye. So I had no choice but to move him in a package deal that got me a young up-and-coming Rudy Gobert as one of the major pieces in return. To be totally honest, it is a trade that I still somewhat regret today. As we all know, Dame Lillard has naturally become a top 10 fantasy player over the past several years, and some even have him in the MVP conversation this year. On the other hand, Rudy Gobert is still a rather solid fantasy player today. Since joining my team, he became a 2-time Defensive Player of the Year and remained a top 40 player in this league, and was one of the best players to target for blocks, rebounds, and field goal percentage over the past 3 to 4 years. Nonetheless, the past couple seasons have been tough. Due to some bad luck with injuries and simply better talent emerging around the league, my team just couldn't compete. So after discussions with my staff and management, I decided to accumulate picks and try to find 2 new core pieces to build around Curry and Gobert. Fast forward to the 2019 NBA Fantasy Draft, I felt like I took a huge step forward with my rebuild, as I was able to land both Zion Williamson and Ja Morant in the same draft, taking Zion Williamson 1st overall and Ja Morant 10th overall this year. And that brings us here today. In many ways, I feel like this season can be a huge turning point for my franchise. I currently have a rather decent core to build around that consists of Steph Curry, Rudy Gobert, Zion Williamson, and Ja Morant. On top of that, we own 4 picks in the first 2 rounds of this draft, from 3rd overall to 22nd overall. Since Curry will be turning 33 soon and Gobert is in the peak of his fantasy prime, I feel like I should put together a good core around them to take advantage of their remaining prime years. And before we head into the draft room, here's a quick look at the other teams in the league to show everyone what type of teams I'm up against this season. What's good, everybody? This is CP again, and I just wanted to quickly give everyone a look at the other teams in my league. As you can see on my screen right here, I wanted to show everyone what I'm up against. So as you can see from the list, every team is built a little bit differently, and in my opinion, almost every team has at least 2 to 3 very solid top 10 to top 35 fantasy players on their keeper list. Now, looking at one of the strongest teams in the league, I feel like Legit Champ is probably the one with the best core, as he somehow managed to get Giannis, AD, Cat, and KD as his 4 keepers. I can't remember the exact details, but I think he made some bold moves early on and was able to land both Cat and Giannis right before they blew up as legit fantasy superstars. So one thing to keep in mind in these type of long-term keeper leagues is that if you really believe in a player, then I think it's worthwhile to pay a little bit more just to get them early on, because once they blow up, then you probably have to pay a lot more to get them. So that's the idea to keep in mind. And for example, players like Luka Doncic and Trae Young, and even Jason Tatum to a certain extent, if you got them maybe like a year or 2 ago, it might have been easier, but now it's probably pretty hard to get them, because if you were to trade for them in long-term Dynasty and keeper leagues, you probably have to give up a lot, and you probably have to mortgage your future to do so, so it might not be the best move in my opinion. And on the other hand, I feel like a team like Sheep Warriors has a pretty good core, because as you can see right now, he has Dame, Kawhi, Jimmy Butler, and Kyrie as his 4 keepers. And on a good day, 3 of those players can easily be top 10 to top 15 fantasy players in most standard 19 leagues. And I feel like he has one of the strongest cores to win right away this season. But if he wants to, he can also blow things up and trade away a guy like Kawhi or Kyrie and acquire a bunch of assets to rebuild on the fly quite quickly. Moving on, I also like a team like Onions, where I think he can do something really special in the long run. First, he has LeBron, and we all know he's not young, but for some reason, he doesn't really seem like he's slowing down yet. So I think if you were to ask me, LeBron should have at least 1 to 2 more seasons of very good fantasy basketball left in him. Along with LeBron, he has 2 very good young keepers under the age of 25 in Booker and Donovan Mitchell. And to top things off, he also has Bradley Beal, who is only 27 years old. So this core should help him be competitive for the foreseeable future. Finally, I really like a team like Broke, as I think he can be very scary as well. Because right now he has 2 very solid foundational pieces in Luka Doncic and Jason Tatum. So if he's able to draft well and make the right trades the next few seasons, he could be set for a long time. And moving on to my team right now, obviously I have Steph, Rudy Gobert, Zion, and Ja Morant, which in my opinion is a little bit of a weird mix of the present and the future. And Steph Curry might never be the MVP Steph Curry ever again, but I think he still should be at least good for 2 to 3 more years. Meanwhile, Rudy Gobert is only 28, and physically I think he's in his basketball prime, so he should give me at least 1 to 2 more solid seasons left, and we'll see if he starts to decline in his early 30s, so we'll see about that. On the other hand, Zion and Ja Morant are not the most elite fantasy players right now, but I feel like they can significantly improve for the next 2 to 4 years. So in my case, I feel like I should be patient and hold on to them to see how they develop. To put things into perspective, Giannis Antetokounmpo only averaged 6.8 points as a rookie, and he didn't really break out as a major fantasy player until his 3rd or 4th year. So if you compare Zion's rookie stats to Giannis, it's fair to say that Zion's fantasy ceiling might be even higher, especially if he figures out his shooting and free throws in the next few years. If he does, I think Zion's fantasy value should skyrocket for the next few years, and optimistically speaking, he could be a top 10 to top 15 player probably within 3 years. Meanwhile, Ja Morant is only in his 2nd season, and it feels like he could break into the top 40 this season. And during his prime, I feel like Ja could average 25 points and 10 assists per game. So if you were to ask me, for younger players like Ja Morant and Zion, I recommend that you get them as early as possible, especially in long-term Dynasty and keeper leagues, because I don't think their fantasy value will get any cheaper in the next few years. So that's a quick look at some of the teams in my league, and here's a quick screenshot of the rest of the league. To get a better look, make sure you pause the screenshot just to see how the other teams are built and how some of the owners have built for their teams in the long run. And make sure you let me know which team you feel like is the best team below. I'm always curious, so make sure you comment below. So moving on to the free agent pool this year, in my opinion, the talent isn't very deep compared to the past few years. So in retrospect, it probably isn't the best year for me to accumulate draft picks. As you can see, this is a 12-team keeper league with 4 players protected each year. So essentially the first round of this draft is equivalent to a 5th round in most standard 12-team leagues. And according to the pre-draft rankings, players like Jusuf Nurkic, Domantas Sabonis, Brandon Ingram, Christian Wood, Jaylen Brown are ranked somewhere in the first round. So overall, in normal pre-drafts, I feel like these players are considered mid-round players, at least for this year. But for this particular league, I can see names like Wood, Sabonis, and maybe even Brandon Ingram go a little bit earlier because they're still very young and have more upside to improve for the next few years. So you could either build your team around them or trade them for future picks. Since I have 2 picks in the first round, 3rd overall and 10th overall, I'll probably go after scoring first, because for those unaware, in typical snake drafts, scoring dries up pretty fast. So usually after the first 4 to 5 rounds, it's very hard to find scoring. And you can't really find a legit 20-point scorer on the waiver wire, especially later in the season. So if you don't get your scoring early, then you either have to trade for them or you have to hope that someone actually breaks out for you. Just by looking at the list, if you were to ask me, my first target would probably be someone like Nurkic, Sabonis, or Brandon Ingram, or even Jaylen Brown if people reach for those names too early, because these names are still pretty young and I feel like they have proven that they can score in the league, so they should be able to improve and only continue to improve for the next few years. And actually, despite the hype around Jason Tatum, I actually think Jaylen Brown doesn't get enough love. If we look at his stats, he has improved nicely over the past 4 seasons, and with a growing role in Boston, I feel like he could average 25 points a game this year. At the same time, we can't forget that Jaylen Brown is only 24 years old, so he might not even be in his prime yet, or might be just entering his prime for that matter, so that's one thing to keep in mind. Meanwhile, I really like Brandon Ingram and I'm very high on him because he's another young player. I feel like too many people are sleeping on him, but he's just entering his prime. And many people forget that he's still very young at 23 years old. And in many ways, he reminds me of a baby Kevin Durant. Last year, Ingram did have a little bit of a breakout year, but honestly, I don't think that's his ceiling yet. I really believe he has more to give, so if all goes well, I think he can average 25, 10, and 8 as early as this year, maybe next season. So he's definitely someone that I want to target somewhere in the first round. Ideally, with my first 2 picks, I'll probably get some scoring to support my core of Steph and Ja Morant and Zion. So if I can land 2 of Ingram, Nurkic, Sabonis, and Brown, if I can get 2 of those, I'll be very happy. With that said, I will see everybody in the draft room. So we're just about to get started with the first round right here. As you can see, Broke actually has 2 picks in the first round, and I have the 3rd overall pick. So I have a feeling that he's going to take one of Nurkic, Ingram, or Sabonis, and maybe someone off the chart, but I'm hoping that I get one of my targets, so we'll see how that goes. And he's taking a little while to pick right here, but maybe he's still trying to decide. But we'll give him some time. So I'm not going to show you guys the whole draft, but maybe some of the highlights. So let's see. He still hasn't picked. There he goes. He takes Nurkic 1st overall. So that's a pretty good pick in my opinion because he's a pretty steady center. And 2nd pick, he takes Porzingis. Ooh, potential franchise player. And for my pick, I'm going to use it on obviously Brandon Ingram. I'm really high on Ingram. I think he's going to keep improving, and I know it's kind of tricky to have 2 New Orleans Pelicans on my roster, so I might have to trade someone down the road. But in these type of snake drafts for keeper leagues, I really want to go after the best player available and trade them after. And then as you can see, ooh, Christian Wood actually went pretty high here. I'm actually pretty high on Wood, but I didn't really expect him to go this early in this draft. And as you can see, people are reaching. They go for So the 5th overall pick is Michael Porter Jr., who could have huge upside as well. So one thing I learned in these type of drafts is that if you want your young talent, you have to go for them early. You have to reach. So you really have to reach for them. And then there goes Sabonis at 6th overall, which is a solid pick. That was going to be my next pick. So I'm coming up right here at 10th overall again. And there's not too many names left. As you can see, it's drying up pretty fast. So I think I might have to go for Jaylen Brown because, like I said earlier, scoring is very hard to find later in the draft. So Robinson goes 7th. I'm hoping that Brown falls to me. If not, then I might have to go deeper down and find someone like Gordon Hayward, who I think will have a huge year as well because on Charlotte Hornets, he's probably one of the main options to score right away. So at 7th overall, we have Robinson, and at 8th overall, actually, JV goes, so 9th overall. So I'm hoping that Ingram falls to me. I'm hoping that Brown falls to me. So Oubre actually goes 9th overall. So this pick right here, I'm going to go Jaylen Brown because I think it's very hard to find someone who can score 20 points a night later in this season. So there you go. Jaylen Brown, 10th overall. And for my picks right now, I feel like my guards and my small forwards are pretty well put together. I also have Zion, and I might actually go for a little bit more scoring next just to pad up my stats. And to give Curry and Zion some more support, I might actually just pad up my stats and go after a little bit more scoring next. My draft pick is coming up 15th overall in 2 picks. So let's see. Goes Robert Covington. Interesting. Actually, I might go for someone like Jaren Jackson Jr. because he's hurt right now, but I think he has huge upside. And if I can get him, maybe I keep him, maybe I trade him later. So we'll see how that goes, but he shouldn't be still available right now. So let's go with Jaren Jackson Jr. And then my front court's going to be tricky because now I have 2 Memphis Grizzlies in Ja and Jaren, and then also 2 New Orleans Pelicans, which is going to be tricky. But like I said, I'd rather take the best player available and trade for assets later. And actually, as you can see, people wanted him in the comments section. Now, my next pick is coming up is 22nd overall. And as you can see, the talent pool is drying up really fast. So I'm actually not too sure who I want to go for. But Gordon Hayward's name looks pretty attractive on this list because he's somewhat of a proven scorer, and I think he could easily bounce back and average over 20 points a game and even give me some assists as well, which is a huge push because I already have Steph and Ja, who I both expect to average at least 7.5 to 8 assists per game this year. So why not pad up my stats for points and assists? If Hayward's gone, then I might actually go for Lonzo Ball or even Draymond Green because those guys are a huge boost in assists as well. And like I said before, it's very hard to find assists later in the draft. So that's probably one of the second categories that I'll target. And Jeremy Grant actually went pretty early as well, but he's in a pretty good situation in Detroit this year. I think he's going to have a huge year. And DeMar DeRozan goes, so 2 more picks, then I'm up again. And LaMarcus Aldridge goes, so if Hayward's still available, I'll probably go after him there. Let's see who Sheep takes. He might be reaching down the list to find someone even younger. So, because Hayward's an older guy, so I'm not sure if people want to go after him if they're looking for young talent with more upside. He's taking a little bit of time, and he picks Lonzo Ball. So, like I said, assists is hard to get. In my case, I'm gonna go after Gordon Hayward now because I want those points. And I feel like with my first 4 picks, I addressed points issue pretty well with Hayward, Ingram, and Jaylen Brown. Meanwhile, Jaren Jackson Jr. is injured, so that's another strategy that you could use is to take an injured player who you can put on IR right away and then add someone else for the season, which is not a bad strategy to use. if you have a good depth on your roster, and I feel like I have a pretty good depth right now. So now moving on, my next pick is coming up at 34th overall. And since I have two high assist point guard and also Gordon Hayward who can give you good assists, I think I might actually go for Draymond Green. He is kind of on the downtrend. Probably not all-star Draymond Green anymore, but for a power forward to give you at least 5 assists per game, that's huge advantage for me, I feel like. So I don't think many people are going to go for him at 34th overall. So I should be able to get him. As you can see, the names are coming in. Not many people are going after Draymond, so I think he's going to drop to me. And Victor Oladipo goes right before, so my pick is up. I'm going to go for Draymond Green. I'm going to make that selection. And now I feel like I have addressed assists for my team. And now probably my next few picks I'll go for different categories. I actually don't pick for a while though, because I traded up to get picks in the first 2 rounds. So I'm just going to chill for a bit and see how this plays out. So we're just about to head to the 6th round of this draft. 6th round is probably equivalent to the 11th round in normal snake drafts. And right now, usually this is a crucial point where a lot of drafts are won, or I mean a lot of leagues are won or lost, because if you can draft well in the later rounds, then some of these guys could give your team a huge boost. Because realistically speaking, in most snake drafts, it's pretty easy to find good talent in the first 3 or 4 rounds, but then it takes a lot more skill and a little bit of luck to find talent later. And my pick is coming up at 61st overall. I'm not sure which direction I'll go, but I probably need another big just to support Rudy Gobert because I'm pretty thin at center. So not many names left as you can see right now. I'm just going to do a quick search. And maybe I'm thinking DeMarcus Cousins, because Cousins is actually going to be a starter, which is a little bit of a gamble, but if he can stay healthy, I think he can produce a little bit for me. So as you can see, I usually don't go for these risky picks at all, but my team is pretty solid in terms of age and upside, so it's okay to go with one risky pick once in a while. And Cousins is going to help me with rebounds and blocks, and he can shoot the 3 as well for a big, so which is a huge bonus because I have one of the best 3-point shooters in Steph Curry on my team already, so that's one thing to keep in mind. And I'm coming up again 70th overall. For my next pick, I'm going to probably go after a high assist guy like Elfrid Payton of the New York Knicks, because Payton does have a pretty big role on the New York Knicks, and it's very hard, like I said before, it's very hard to find assists later in the draft, and having Payton on my team is only going to pad up my assist categories. So just moving on, I just want to quickly show everyone my roster, and it's pretty much all my starters are filled up. I feel like I have a pretty well balanced roster, and Brandon Ingram, I feel like he's gonna give me a lot of upside. At the same time, I expect Jaylen Brown to have a big year, so if those 2 guys can give me a huge year, then I could have 6 players in the top 40 to top 30. And quite frankly, Steph, if he returns back to form, he could be a top 5 to top 10 player. And I don't have a pick for a while, so we're just playing the waiting game here. Moving on, I have the 99th overall pick, which is pretty deep in the draft. And as you can see, I have a lot of question marks on my queue list. But now I feel like it's time to reach for a rookie, and I really like a name like Isaac Okoro of the Cleveland Cavaliers. He had a pretty good preseason, and right now it's probably a good time just to take younger players with good upside, because worst case scenario, I could trade them, but if they somehow have a breakout season later in the year, then he's going to help my team in the fantasy playoffs. And now my next pick is coming up. I really like to get another guy for my rebounds and field goal percentage. Then there's not too many good centers left, So I feel like a name like Mason Plumlee might be my target because Detroit has a pretty thin front court, and Plumlee can get blocks, he can get rebounds. He might not be the guy with the most upside, but he's more like a depth center that I can use to help support my other big guns like Zion and Rudy. So I'm gonna go Mason Plumlee, 108th overall. And now we're actually going very deep into the next round. So we're going very deep into the 10th round. I have the 118th pick, and you can see my Q list is almost completely wiped out. I only have 3 players left in Garland, Redick, and Maxi Kleber. So maybe I have to go for another big. I like Kleber because he's a versatile big who can hit threes, get rebounds, and block shots. Also, Porzingis, you don't know when he'll return, or he's always dealing with knee injuries, so Kleber could actually come in and take a lot of garbage time minutes. So let's go with Maxi Kleber. And I think I only have one more pick left at 123rd overall. Generally speaking, threes are pretty easy to get later in the draft, so I wouldn't go after them unless you get an elite three-point shooter like Steph or James Harden in snake drafts. So with my last pick now, as you can see, I'm gonna go after someone who is proven, who can hit threes and help me in that category. So probably a name like JJ Redick is someone that I'm gonna draft, because if he can get me those extra 2 or 3 triples a game, it's gonna go a long way in helping me. And let's see my final roster right here. According to Yahoo, I'm actually only the 6th best team, but I think it's taking into consideration that Jaren Jackson Jr. is injured. So I feel like my goal right now is just to get into the playoffs. Then once Triple J comes back, my team's going to be a lot better. And we can't forget the fact that Zion might actually improve this year, and Jaylen Brown and Ingram, I'm banking on their upside as well. And Okoro is another sleeper that I really like, because I feel like later in the year, if the Cavs suck and they tank, they might give Okoro more time to develop. And now here's actually a quick look at the draft summary, just to show you guys some of the highlights of this draft. As you can see, Nurkic went 1st overall, Porzingis 2nd. So those are pretty good picks in my opinion. And Porzingis is still pretty young, so he could, if he's healthy, he could be a huge franchise player for Broke. Meanwhile, I took Ingram 3rd overall, which I'm okay with that pick. Let me know what you think. And on the other hand, you can see that Christian Wood actually went 4th overall. I'm actually kind of surprised because I actually wanted him at 10th overall, but he didn't fall to me. And then you can see the trickle effect right there, where Michael Porter Jr. went 5th overall, and that's a bonus. So a lot of the younger players went early in this draft. Then I got Jaylen Brown at 10th overall. And then moving on to the 2nd round, as I saw everyone started to reach, so that's why I had to go for Jaren Jackson Jr. because I'm not sure why he was dropped in this league. Maybe the other team had a very deep keeper list, but then I have to take him because there's upside for Triple J to improve. He might actually end up as one of my keepers. If not, I could probably flip him at the deadline for some assets. Then one regret that I had is that I didn't go after James Wiseman a little bit earlier, because I really think this guy is special and he could be a franchise center for my fantasy team for a long time, but sadly he didn't really fall to me. So by the 10th overall pick, I didn't really have too much of a choice, and I might as well just pad up my scoring, so I went for Gordon Hayward. And moving on to the 3rd round, you can see that scoring was starting to dry up, so in that case, Broke actually went for Colin Sexton, who I think is a solid pick, because in his first 2 years, I think he averaged over 20 points, and this year he could easily average 25 points, so which is a huge pick. And then I'm not too happy about the Draymond Green pick. He is pretty injury prone and he's getting up there in his age, but having a power forward or a center who could average over 5 assists per game is huge in my opinion. So even if Draymond is healthy for 80% of the games, I feel like he's going to help me for assists, rebounds, steals, and blocks. Now moving on to the 4th round right here, you see that I'm kind of surprised that Kemba Walker was still available. He is old, there are injury concerns, but if he comes back on the Celtics roster, he's going to be the starter and he could be averaging over 20 points a game again. The 5th and 6th round, to be totally honest, is getting a bit dry, but one highlight is probably Darius Baisley. He's one of the sleepers that I wanted to target. I was expecting him to last a little bit longer, but apparently Legit Champ got him very early, so I really like that pick for him. Which leaves me to round 6. I was really looking for a big man. I didn't have much of a choice, so I went for DeMarcus Cousins. Injury prone, but when he's on the court, he's pretty much a beast, so I'm banking that he stays relatively healthy this year. And now moving down to the 7th round, usually in normal slate drafts, this is like the 11th or 12th round, so this is probably where the drafts are won and lost, because you can get a lot of good sleepers or breakout players. And I really like Legit Champ's pick because he took Chris Boucher, which was on my list. But once again, I expect him to drop a little longer, but Legit Champ got him, so good for him. And then Killian Hayes of the Detroit Pistons is a very interesting one by console as well, because I feel like Hayes has a huge upside. And Detroit is probably rebuilding, so they probably get rid of Derrick Rose and give Hayes a lot of time to develop. Moving on to the 9th round, as you can see, not too much talent to choose from. So I feel like Isaac Okoro was my pick because since everyone was reaching for rookies, I wanted to get in on the rookie action. So Okoro, I feel like he should have an expanding role on the Cavs. He might not break out or might have a rough year to start at the beginning, but he's worth a hold for maybe later in the last few months of the season when your matches actually matter. I feel like Okoro could be someone that could surprise and come up big for me later on in the season. So after looking at all the rounds, here's a quick look at some of the teams. As you can see, Broke now has Porzingis, Nurkic, Whiteside, Markkanen, and then his big four are Clint Capella, Luka Doncic, Jason Tatum to build around. So that's pretty solid, well-balanced roster in my opinion. He also got Tyler Hero pretty late, so that could be an interesting sleeper to go after. Meanwhile, for me, obviously I have my big four in Steph, Zion, Rudy Gobert, and Ja Morant. But then I also solidified my scoring with my first few picks with Brandon Ingram, Jaylen Brown, and Gordon Hayward. Then maybe in the middle I had a few questionable picks, but I'm hoping that they have a big year, so that's very late in the draft, so you tell me if I did bad or good. Mommy's champion, he went with a more interesting approach, so he actually got Christian Wood very early, 4th overall in this draft, and I think he could end up being one of the keepers for him this season because Wood's gonna get a huge opportunity in Houston to eat as much as he can. Meanwhile, he also got a second rookie in Patrick Williams in the very late, which is one of his last picks, I believe. And if you were to ask me, I think the Bulls are gonna be developing Williams because he looks like a player that they're very high on, and he looks like a regular NBA player, pretty poised, so he could be a huge sleeper pick for Mommy's champion. Now moving on to the other teams, here's a quick look. Console champ went after Michael Porter Jr. right away, so that could be a huge pickup for him because you can see that his core is getting a little bit older with Westbrook, Simmons, Chris Paul. So he might actually replace one of Chris Paul with Michael Porter Jr., especially if he breaks out. And then he also picked LaMelo Ball and Killian Hayes. So that's another 2 rookies he could potentially keep. So I can see that he's a little bit of an older team, so which is why he's going for younger players. And then for Sheep Warriors, he has a pretty good dominant core that can win right now already with Lillard, Leonard, Butler, and Kyrie Irving. But then he surrounded his core with some pretty proven players in Wiggins, DeRozan, Sabonis, Lonzo Ball, and he got Kemba Walker really late, which could be a huge pickup for him. And for Oops, he got Trae Young, John Collins, James Harden, and Chris Middleton. So that's a pretty solid backcourt to build around. And then so in his early draft, he went after Mitch Robinson, who could be a very useful player for blocks and rebounds. At the same time, he surrounded his players with Brook Lopez, who's not a huge upside, but very dependable for blocks and threes. And he also got Duncan Robinson, who is one of the best 3-point shooters in the league, to help out Trae Young and John Collins. So I kind of like that pick for him. And now here's a quick look at one of the best teams in the league, in my opinion, a legit champ. So just a reminder, he has AD, Kat, Giannis, and KD as his 4 keepers. And he was actually able to target a lot of younger players with breakout potential like Darius Bazley, Chris Boucher, Marvin Bagley to surround them, because he didn't have too many of the high draft picks, because I think he traded them all last year to go after the chip. But then now he has those players to support his big 4. So once again, I feel like he's another top 3 team to head into this season. For Onions, it's interesting because he has LeBron, Booker, Bradley Beal, and Mitchell, which is a decent core. And he also got first overall pick Anthony Edwards, who could be a legit player for him down the line. And quickly, here's a quick screenshot of the other 3 teams. So here's a look at Poncho, Team Rebuild, and Basement Champ. Overall, let me know which team you like the best. And overall, let me know what you think of my draft. Did I draft bad? Did I draft like trash? Or did I draft okay? Or how you think I'm going to do? And if you like these kind of videos, I can continue to make some more for you down the road. That's it for today. I will see everybody next time. 走起吧。